Okay, guys, so this set of notes is going to be the last dead puzzle that we do for integumentary system, and this is going to cover hair, nails, and glands. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so hair and hair follicles, as we go through this last integumentary set of notes, these are kind of like the accessory organs, so to speak, or the accessory structures that are found inside of the skin. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through. That's how they fit in with this whole integumentary system. Hair itself is going to be a structure that's found across the entire body, inside the skin. The only place it's not found are the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, your lips, your nipples, and part of the external genitalia. Everywhere else has hair follicles distributed pretty evenly. And the reason for that is because they serve really four main purposes. Hair on your body, so arms, legs, back, wherever, have an evolutionary purpose of being able to detect insects on your skin before they sting or bite you. So the hair would trigger essentially the nerve that's underneath, kind of sending a signal to your brain that says, hey, there's something on you, so you can swat it away or try to get rid of it before it hurts you. The hair on your scalp guards against physical trauma, heat loss, and sunlight. So making if you're out in an area and you're walking around with like a bunch of branches and that comes across your scalp, the hair will help protect from like cuts on top of your head. And then heat loss, it just acts as like an insulator, and then sunlight, it acts as a barrier between your scalp and the UV radiation. Eyelashes and also eyebrows, they help shield your eyes from dirt and dust and debris, also from sweat from getting into your eyes. And then your nose hairs, they filter large particles from and keep them from getting into our respiratory system so that we're not breathing in like dust and pollen and things like that. All right, so the hair itself, we can also call hair pili, which basically means just like a long, skinny structure. Um, the part of the hair that we typically think of as hair, this part that sits above the surface, that is made up of dead keratinized epithelial cells. So that's where that epithelial tissue comes into play. There are two regions for each hair. So you've got the shaft, which is the old dead cells, the old keratinized cells, and the keratin just makes it so that the hair stays strong. Um, and then you also have the root, which is this part that sits below the skin inside of the follicle. So this portion, this kind of pink area, that's the follicule. And the follicle is the portion that actually makes the cells. And then the root is the part of the hair that is anchored into the follicle. So this portion right here is the living part, which is why it hurts when you pull a hair out. Because it also is lined up. You can kind of see them here. These little teeny tiny yellow structures, those are nerve endings. So each hair follicle is associated with a little bit of blood and then also with your nerve endings. So that's why it hurts to like have your hair pulled. So the hair root is at the bottom, and then again, it sits inside of this little follicle, and the follicle is what feeds the root, the blood, and also the nerve. Now, depending on which portion of the body and also things like waxing, the hair root and the follicle can actually sometimes sit all the way down to like your major blood vessels inside the subcutaneous layer. That's going to be true for like more coarse hair. But the reason for that, it just wants to be anchored a little bit deeper. And then the longer you let a hair go without like pulling it out or without waxing, the more that this follicle and subsequently the root can be established inside. So it'll establish itself deeper. That's why if you go and like get facial hair waxed off, or you go and get like chest hair waxed off, or whatever it may be, it's probably going to bleed the first time because you do have more of that blood vessel anchored into it. But after that, because the blood vessel has been disrupted, and essentially the follicle will start to recede from that area, so it won't bleed as much or hurt as much after you keep getting it done. Hair color, we talked about a little bit already, that hair color is determined by genetics. So like my hair, for example, when I was really little, it was super blonde, and now my natural hair color is more of like a light brown color. But that's all based on genetics. Your natural hair color, we talked about melanin when we talked about skin color, but melanin does still play a role in hair color. Um, the uh, so the type of hair that you have and the amount of melanin, that determine, or that's all based off of genetics. So the darker hair that you have, the more eumelanin that you have, that's that brownish black pigment. Whereas red hair and blonde hair, those contain more of what's called pheomelanin, that reddish yellow color. If you have no melanin at all, that's what we call albinism. So that would be somebody who's albino. And that's why their skin is very translucent and their hair almost has like a very reddish, translucent, clear blonde shade to it. And that's just because they're not producing any melanin at all. Um, when you mix pigmented and unpigmented hair together, that's how you get gray hair. So gray hair is actually basically some hairs are starting to lose their melanin while others keep them. So as a result, it appears gray. Um, and then underneath your skin, you have these muscles, these smooth muscle cells, and they're called erector pili muscles. So that's this guy right here. And what their job is to do, so this is one of the few smooth muscle tissues that is not found in a hollow organ. But what their job is to do is when the muscle is attached to the hair shaft or the hair follicle, excuse me, and when that muscle contracts, it causes the hair to stand up. So this is why you get goosebumps or goose pimples, depending on what you call them, or you can also get them during emotional response. So if you're scared or if you're really angry, sometimes those pili muscles can contract, and that causes the hair to stand up. And it's just another evolutionary response where the cold temperature, what it does is it increases the surface area of your skin. Whereas emotional response, it kind of signals to your central nervous system, your fight or flight mode. All right, so your fingernails. Fingernails are actually layers of like a scale-like covering. So your fingernails has multiple layers, and it is on the dorsal surface of the distal part of your finger or toe. So it's on the backside of the end of your finger or the end of your toe. So they are scaly. Anybody who's ever gotten their nails done with like acrylics or even sometimes just really strong press-on nails or really strong glue nails, you've probably seen your nails flake off, and that's what's going. It's because it's scaly. All right, as far as the structure of the nail, it is made up of three really main parts. You have the free edge, which is like the part that you can like clip. This is the part that has completely gone away from the cuticle, which is this part underneath, or the body, excuse me, underneath here. And then you have the root all the way down at the bottom. And the root of the nail actually extends underneath the fingernail. So this is why your fingernail can go, or your nail itself actually extends underneath the skin at the base of the nail. Um, so the cuticle portion, which is this little part here, is this is the part of the nail that feeds the nail in terms of providing nutrients. The cuticle is also called the eponychium, so kind of a fun word there. But the purpose of the cuticle is to provide more nutrients to the nail itself, actually feeding it from the top. The nail bed is this portion underneath where it is bloody. That's why if you've ever hit or jammed your finger into something, like into a door, it will pretty much bleed pretty quickly up underneath, and then it'll bruise. And sometimes that'll cause the nail to fall off because you've disrupted that blood flow. The lunule is this thick proximal portion. So the reason it's called a lunule is because it kind of looks like a crescent moon or a half moon in some ways. But that is also responsible for growth. The lunule will go underneath the eponychium. So again, the eponychium provides the nutrients. The lunule is responsible for growth. So really, if you mess up that lunule portion, your nail can be in a lot of trouble in terms of growth. Your nail does appear pinkish in color because of the blood that's underneath. That's in the body of the nail, or excuse me, in the nail bed underneath the body. And so you have all that blood supply underneath, as I mentioned before, and that blood supply is why if you hurt your fingernail good enough, it'll fall off. You can also use your nail color to diagnose conditions. Like blue fingernails means that it could be a circulatory problem. A kind of greenish blue means that you have been ingesting, oh my gosh, uh, that means you've been ingesting, it's a poison. It was very common in like the early 1900s for people to poison their loved ones with this. And I'll have to look up what it's called, but yellow fingernails can be an indicator of jaundice. Stripes on your fingernails is another indicator of lack of nutrients or malnutrition. So your fingernails can also lead to uh, evidence of conditions in your body. All right, sweat glands. So sweat glands are also known as sudoriferous glands. So there's going to be two types of glands that we talk about: sudoriferous glands and then sebaceous glands. How I remember that sweat glands are sudoriferous, it almost has the word odor in it. So if you kind of look and you're like, oh my gosh, is it sudoriferous if it's talking about sweat, or is it sebaceous? Well, sweat, when you sweat a lot, you get stinky. So sudoriferous almost looks like that word odor. So that's how I remember it. Now, there are technically two types of sweat glands. You have eccrine or merocrine glands. These are your more abundant type of sweat glands, and they're really kind of all over your body, but they are most abundant on the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, and your forehead. So basically, anywhere that your body really starts to sweat when you're trying to keep cool. So the main purpose of the eccrine sweat glands is to prevent your body from overheating. So it secretes sweat, and the sweat, once it evaporates, that is called evaporative cooling. So it cools the skin and the body. Now, apocrine sweat glands, these guys develop during puberty, and these are the reasons that, like, when somebody's going through puberty, they start to stink. So these ones are the ones that are the basis of body odor. It's just, and body odor is not because somebody's sweating, but it's because of the bacteria that grows in that area. Places like your armpits and your groin, not only are those areas that have abundant apocrine sweat glands, but on top of that, they stay wet with the sweat, and they stay really warm, and it's just a feeding ground for bacteria. But these sweat glands don't really become abundant or active until a person starts going through puberty. Now, these sweat glands, they don't really know a whole lot about why we have them, but they do activate after puberty during times of fear, if you're emotional or upset about something, like nervous, if you're getting ready for like a big test or a job interview, and then also sexual arousal. So that part of what they think why apocrine sweat glands are there and why they emit kind of a more odor smell to them is because they think it has something to do with the pheromones and being attracted to somebody. So, in a sense, you are somewhat attracted to your partner's sweat glands. Sebaceous glands, this is the other type of gland that I mentioned. These are your oil glands, and sebaceous glands are associated with hair follicles. So, essentially, where there's a hair follicle, there is a sebaceous gland associated with it. And the reason for the sebaceous glands is these guys, let me put the rest of these up here. These guys will make sure that your hair is staying soft and that it's staying basically not drying out to the point where it's going to fall out. And then it also adds a protective, because it's an oil, and we know that water and oil don't like each other. It protects the skin even more from water loss, or it helps protect or waterproof the skin. So it'll also soften and lubricate the skin, making sure again that it doesn't dry out completely. Again, sebaceous glands are found all over the body except for the palms of your hands and soles of your feet. Everywhere else you have oil, and that oil is specifically called sebum. So that's why we call them sebaceous glands, sebum, sebaceous. The other really cool thing about sebaceous glands and the sebum that they secrete is that it has bactericidal action. So it's a really good kind of antibiotic. That's why it's bad for you to like wash your hair, your body too often because you're getting rid of that sebum, which can help protect against bacteria. So here are those structures that we talked about. If we're looking at a cross section of skin, so up at the top here is our epidermis and those 4 or 5 layers. And then you have the beginning of the dermis all the way down to your sebaceous gland. So here is our hair follicle and the hair bulb, having that nerve wrapped around it. You also have nerve endings that would be coming up into the follicle itself. Here's that erector pili muscle, which is responsible for pulling the hair up when it contracts. Now, here is that sebaceous gland, and this is how when in the notes it said that it's associated with the hair gland, and that's because it's literally right next to the hair gland. So you actually secrete your sebum from the same opening that your hair comes out of. So that's why areas like the top of your head get oily faster than say on the tops of your feet or the tops of your hands because there's not as much hair there. Our sweat glands or our sudoriferous glands, those are over here and they kind of look like these crazy little tubes, but they get their own pores that they come out of. So sweat is secreted from a completely different area than the oil. Now, we do also have some modified sweat glands. So ceruminous glands, those are going to be wax in the ear canal. And those are to trap dust and pathogens, just making sure they don't get into the ear, which can then lead into the throat. And then also mammary glands, those secrete milk during breastfeeding to help nourish the baby. But those are technically types of sweat glands. So those are types of these guys. Excuse me. So they're just, they are produced a little bit differently so that they're secreting slightly different stuff. All right, the last part of our notes are the functions of the integumentary system. So obviously, overall, the integumentary system, whether we're talking about skin or hair or fingernails, the overall main purpose is for protection. Another really big function of the integumentary system is body temperature regulation that we talked about with really the skin and talking about providing that insulation. But then we also talked about it with sweat, and you sweat to try to cool down. So because temperature regulation is really important for homeostasis, we don't want to be too hot and we don't want to be too cold. The skin has a huge role in this, not only in doing its job to help insulate and cool, but also with having all of these receptors to send those signals to the hypothalamus of the brain. Active cells, such as those in the heart and skeletal muscle and the liver, those produce heat. And so the skin is responsible for getting rid of that excessive heat through radiation and then also evaporative cooling, which is what we talked about with sweating. The integumentary system is also important for metabolic function, it actually does help break down some stuff for metabolism. And then it is an important blood reservoir and it's important for excretion or getting rid of that extra substances and wastes. This is that portion of excretion. That is why if and when you turn 21 and you decide to partake in drinking of adult beverages, if you consume too many, afterwards you can literally smell the alcohol on your skin. So even though you haven't drank in excessive like hours, that the last drink you had was 10 hours ago, you will literally be sweating alcohol. And you can smell it coming off of your skin. So that's part of that excretion of getting rid of like excessive waste, especially toxic things through your skin. All right, so that is it for the integumentary system ed puzzles. But as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we can discuss more in class, and I'll see you then.